Brandon Aiyuk is out here begging Jaden Daniels to bring him to Washington, and in a second I'm going to tell you exactly why. Adam Peters still hasn't picked up the phone and whether he's right to hesitate. According to Adam Schefter and Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, the 49ers are cutting Aiyuk when training camp opens, a receiver who in 2023 posted a 92.7 impact score, fourth in the entire league, and who might end up signing for the veteran minimum. That's what public drama does to a player's market value, but before you decide whether you want Aiyuk in Burgundy and Gold, there's something about his knee that almost nobody is talking about, and it completely changes the math. Meanwhile, Joe Theismann, 76 years old Super Bowl champion with this franchise, and Frankie Louvu, all-pro linebacker, are both seeing the exact same thing in Ashburn right now, and what they're saying about Jaden Daniels goes deeper than hunger. It's something tactical that Peters quietly built all off-season long, and we close with Terry McLaurin, who came back to OTAs in full war mode, and there are 7 players on this roster who should not be sleeping well tonight, including one with a proven track record whose mandatory minicamp was so rough, his spot is seriously in question. All of that right now. Raise hail. Lidos. Does Washington have the stomach for this? Okay, I'm going to be straight with you from the jump because there's a lot of noise swirling around this story and I want to cut through it clean. Brandon Aiyuk is getting released by the San Francisco 49ers when training camp opens. At this point, that is not a serious debate. Adam Schefter said it directly. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN confirmed it from the inside. The player is currently on what the 49ers call the left squad list, which is a list that a player has to formally apply to Commissioner Roger Goodell to get off of. You don't do that to a guy you're planning to keep. And Fowler dropped something that should terrify anyone who is Brandon Aiyuk's agent right now. There are people around the league who believe that when he gets cut, if he gets cut, he might have to sign somewhere for the veteran minimum. A receiver who, in 2023, was ranked 4th in the entire league by Pro Football Network's WR impact metric with an impact score of 92.7, potentially signing for the minimum. That right there tells you everything about what very public drama does to a player's market value now. What does this mean for Washington? Aiyuk has said publicly more than once that he wants to play with Jaden Daniels. They have a connection that predates the NFL, and that is real, and it has value in offensive chemistry. The case for signing him is clear. He comes cheap, he comes motivated, and at his best, he was a legitimate elite receiver. 4,305 receiving yards, 294 catches, 27 touchdowns across 69 games. That is not a system player. That is a real talent. But here's what a lot of people are glossing over, and it is the part that concerns me most as a fan who actually wants this team to win in 2026. First, Aiyuk tore his ACL and his MCL at the same time. That is a double injury in the same knee. The recovery from something like that is not linear, and the most important question is not whether he can run. It is whether he can make the explosive cuts and the precise technical routes that made him special before. Receivers who rely on their burst and their directional change are the most vulnerable after that kind of injury. I am not saying he did not recover. Nobody knows that yet. But it is a legitimate question that you cannot just wave away because the guy posted 14 Instagram stories with Commanders memes. Second, and this is what has been generating the most debate this week, the off-field behavior. Super Bowl champion TJ Ward was completely honest about this on the Speakeasy show, and there is no soft way to say what he said. Basically, Ward's argument was that if he were the GM, he would not sign Aiyuk regardless of any connection to the quarterback. His reasoning was not about the talent, it was about the signal it sends to the other 31 ownership groups when a player uses social media to publicly pressure his franchise, shows up driving erratically near the team facility, throws money around, and talks badly about ownership. Ward's framing was blunt. NFL owners are a club, 32 billionaires who move as one. That is the reality of the business. Now look, I want to be fair about the limits of Ward's argument. Aiyuk's behavior off the field is irritating and politically costly for any team that signs him, sure. But on the field, when he was healthy, he was one of the best receivers in the NFC. And the Commanders, coming off that brutal 5-12 season, need offensive weapons. The real question is not whether Aiyuk has talent. The question is whether that talent arrives intact after the knee and whether Adam Peters decides that the media distraction is worth the risk in a year when Dan Quinn is under enormous pressure to bounce back. If they sign him and Aiyuk shows up at 90% of his pre-injury level, that changes the receiving conversation in the DMV completely, but that is a big if. What my read on Washington's front office tells me is this: Peters is methodical. He does not make reactive decisions. Schefter said he had questions about Aiyuk heading into the draft, and I seriously doubt those questions disappeared just because the player posted some memes. If Peters signs Aiyuk, it is because he is convinced the knee is right, the price is low, and the chemistry with Daniels can accelerate his transition into David Blau's system. If he does not sign him, it is because one of those three conditions does not check out. My personal take: wait for training camp. If Aiyuk shows that the knee responds and he is running routes with confidence and the price is genuinely close to the veteran minimum, Peters signs him. If the price creeps up beyond what the cap allows, given that Washington has to protect space for Daniels' extension, he walks. That is not an emotional decision. Peters does not make those, but I'll keep it a buck with y'all. If Aiyuk arrives healthy and cheap, I want that receiver in Burgundy and Gold. And I think most of this fan base does too. Tell me below. There is something worth paying attention to when two very different people see the same thing. Joe Theismann is 76 years old. He won a Super Bowl with this franchise back when they were still the Redskins. He has historical perspective that none of us have. And Frankie Louvu is a second-team All-Pro linebacker who has been in the trenches long enough to know the difference between training camp vibes and real signals of a team ready to compete. When those two are saying the same thing about the 2026 Commanders, you stop and you listen. Theismann was direct in a recent interview. He believes Jayden Daniels is chomping at the bit for this season to start. That is not the reflexive optimism of a franchise legend who always wants to say good things about his team. That is an observation from someone who understands what an injury does to a quarterback's psychology. Daniels played only 7 games last year, 1,262 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. The team finished 5-12. That hurts in a particular way when the year before you were the offensive rookie of the year. You led the franchise to the NFC Championship game and the entire city adored you. But what Theismann noticed, and this is what I think matters most, is that Daniels did not waste that time away from the field. He used those months of recovery to learn David Blau's system, the new offensive coordinator. That matters tactically more than people are giving it credit for. Blau comes with a different philosophy than Cliff Kingsbury's. Less shotgun, more under center, more play action, more pre-snap deception. That is exactly the kind of football that exploits the abilities of a mobile quarterback like Daniels. The run threat forces linebackers to check down before helping in coverage, which opens the slants and crossers for Terry McLaurin and Chig Okonkwo. If Daniels arrives at training camp already fluent in those concepts, the learning curve that destroys most quarterbacks when they switch systems shrinks dramatically. Theismann also said something no fan can ignore. The division is going to be much harder. Dallas got better, the Giants got better, and the Eagles are still the Eagles. The NFC East might be the best division in football in 2026, and Washington has to navigate that with a quarterback in a bounce-back year and a defense that last season gave up 26.5 points per game, 27th in the league, and that is exactly where Frankie Louvu comes into the conversation. What Louvu said about Durante Jones' new defense was not a generic training camp motivational speech. It was a tactical description from a linebacker who knows precisely what kind of scheme he is processing. Younger, faster, more explosive. We're just hunting. Very aggressive, very downhill. We're disruptive. 4 descriptors that describe exactly what this defense lacked last year. Downhill aggression and disruption before the snap even happens. Adam Peters heard that diagnosis and he acted on it. He signed Odef Owe, a young edge rusher with explosive speed, to 4 years and $100 million. He added Leo Chenal from the Kansas City Chiefs, 3 years, nearly $25 million, a linebacker who played in a championship system and knows what it feels like to do his job when the stakes are real. He used the number 7 overall pick on Sonny Styles from Ohio State, a linebacker that Theismann described as someone destined to be the cornerstone of Washington's defensive identity for the next decade. All of that on top of a foundation that already includes Jordan Meiji and Luvu himself. Luvu's point about the youth and athleticism of this group is tactically significant. The defense last year was predictable. When you are predictable defensively and your secondary is already struggling, rival quarterbacks absolutely pick you apart in the second half. Durrani Jones is building a defense that does not give the opponent the opportunity to read you before the snap. A defense that attacks gaps before the running back can establish his path. A defense that keeps the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket because the rush is coming from different angles and different speeds on every down. That, combined with a hungry Jaden Daniels, who has spent nearly a year studying Blau's system, genuinely has me excited about 2026, not blindly. Theismann was honest that the division is brutal and the work is hard, but the direction is right. And when the direction is right and the quarterback is elite, things align faster than people expect. And 7 guys in Ashburn should be sweating right now. Listen, I get frustrated when people underestimate how much locker room culture matters. It's easy to talk about scheme and cap space and draft picks. What is hard to measure is what happens in that building on a Tuesday afternoon when none of the cameras are rolling. That is exactly what Terry McLaurin gave back to this team. Last year, McLaurin showed up late to training camp because his contract dispute dragged on longer than expected. When he arrived, his body was not ready. He got injured in Week 3 against the Las Vegas Raiders, a quad and hip flexor issue that limited him for weeks. By the time he worked his way back, Washington was already in free fall. McLaurin could not be the anchor that this young group of receivers needs, and it showed in the offensive production and in the energy around the facility. This year is different. NFL Network insider Mike Garafolo spoke with McLaurin and came away with a clear sense that the 2-time Pro Bowler was genuinely frustrated by not being able to help the team build on their NFC championship run. That frustration turned into work. McLaurin showed up to OTAs in shape, focused, and immediately in mentor mode. He took Antonio Williams, the 3rd-round pick, and Jaden Bradley, an undrafted free agent who has been making noise in practice, under his wing. Dan Quinn deliberately raised the intensity of practices this offseason, and veterans like McLaurin responded by leading from the front. That is real culture, not a speech at the press podium. It's an all-pro receiver telling a 22-year-old rookie how to study defenses at 11 at night, how to prepare your body for the grind of training camp, what to look for in a cover 2 shell when the safety rotates late. That does not show up in a box score, but it absolutely determines whether a young team knows how to compete when the pressure is real in the final 2 minutes of a playoff game. And at the same time, the roster competition is going to be fierce. Beat reporters covering the team from Ashburn have identified at least 7 players whose roster spot is genuinely in question. Coming out of the off-season program, the most notable case is Akello Witherspoon, a cornerback with solid career production, but whose performance in mandatory minicamp raised real concerns. And here is the thing about Witherspoon's situation that matters most. It is not just the coverage side, it is special teams. When you're low on a cornerback depth chart, if you cannot contribute consistently on special teams, your value to the roster drops sharply. With Trey Amos, Mike Sainristil, and Amick Robertson locked in as the starting trio, the space below them is tight. The deeper question this raises for me is, at what point does internal roster competition stop being motivation and start creating counterproductive tension? Quinn is a good enough coach to know where that line is. And I think part of what McLaurin does with his energy and his presence is keep that line visible for everyone. The guys who want to be here and work to be here, they stay. The guys who do not, they go. That is how a high-standard roster operates. And fam, that is what we want in Ashburn. No free passes, no safe spots based on reputation alone, just whoever works. That is everything I have for today, fam. 3 stories, 3 different angles of the same Commanders trying to turn the page after a 5-12 season that hurt everyone in the DMV. The Brandon Aiyuk question does not have a simple answer, and I am not going to pretend it does. If he arrives healthy and cheap, it could work. If he arrives with the knee compromised and the circus that follows him from San Francisco, it could hurt a team that needs to stay focused. Peters is going to make the right call. He has before. Durante Jones' defense has me genuinely excited in a way this franchise's defense has not generated in years. And the fact that someone like Frankie Louvu, a guy who has played in bad systems and good ones, is using those specific words to describe what he sees tells me this is not just training camp talk. There is something real being built there, and Terry McLaurin back in full mode. Y'all don't understand what that does for a locker room. It changes the temperature of everything. He has done it since day one in Ashburn, so if you're nervous after last year, watch what they're building, not in a single day, but in the right direction. Raise hail, always. If this video gave you something today, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, would you sign Brandon Aiyuk if the price is the veteran minimum and the knee is medically cleared? I want to read every single response. See you in the next one.